What if I told you that the fastest way to sound fluent in French is to sound horrible first? It sounds crazy, but that's exactly what worked for me. Many beginner French learners often spend so much time learning, and that often leads to burnout and to people giving up. Well, instead of spending a lot of time learning, you can take some of that time and devote it to actually starting to take action and starting to speak in French. And this was something that I saw in a video from a couple days ago, but this applies to French learning, which is you get further faster when you take imperfect action rather than perfect inaction. And so what that means for this application here is you need to just give yourself permission to get out there and start putting the reps in of speaking French. And even if it doesn't sound very good, and even if you're not confident in your abilities right now, getting that initial start and moving your mouth and learning the muscle movements and making those connections in your brain when you're physically putting your skills to the test is very, very important. And doing this kind of learning as you go is going to help you tremendously compared to just continuing to study over and over again. You see these kinds of examples just in daily life. If you're starting a new job, there's a lot to learn. You get a lot of training oftentimes at the beginning. You learn how to, if you're working at a store, you'll learn how to run the cash register, where to find items in the store, how to, you know, stock shelves, all that kind of stuff. And at the beginning, it's very overwhelming. You start to feel like you might not be able to get all of that mastered to do your job. But then when you actually get out and start putting all that knowledge to use, you start to learn not only what actions you have to take, and not only do you start to get to physically practice it, but your brain starts to figure out what learning you need to prioritize and what learning you might not need. Because, like with the store example, in French, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to learn and see that you might not even need in everyday conversation. So by taking action and starting to speak and starting to figure out what's going on, your brain is going to prioritize and learn what exactly you need to focus on in French. Speaking of the brain, my next point here is there is a psychological aspect of being nervous and making that first step to start speaking French. And that is when you're studying endlessly and you keep telling yourself that you're not confident in your abilities and that you can't speak French and that you're just not good enough, it, it it's kind of a domino effect. Once you start feeling nervous and you keep zeroing in on the parts of French that you may not understand, that nervousness is just going to keep growing and growing, and you're just going to keep getting in your own head more and more, and you're just going to keep digging that hole of nervousness even deeper. But to prevent that, you will just have to go out and you're going to have to acknowledge that yes, you may not sound very good yet when speaking French, but you have to make the initial push to just start speaking anything, even the most simple of sentences. Because once you do that, the psychological aspect of what's happening in your brain, nervousness is gonna break. Once you push through to start taking those first steps to speak, that you're gonna poke through that nervousness, and then when you go to speak the next time, it'll be easier to push past the nervousness and the self-doubt. And once you keep doing that over and over again, you're going to become a lot more confident every single time you go to have a conversation. And the nervousness is eventually going to go away. And it'll end up being that you have a whole bunch of confidence and your nervousness will be next to nothing. If you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more beginner French tips and content like this. The next reason why you need to speak bad French is because other people are doing the same exact thing with other languages. If you find yourself in France or any other French-speaking country, and you try to speak with a native speaker and they discourage you or they act rude and switch to English and just try to overall put you down, you have to remember that if they're speaking English, there's a good chance that they are learning that as their second language or maybe even their third language. And their English is probably not going to sound very good either. They may have a heavy accent. They may make a whole bunch of errors too when they're speaking. And that's okay. They still have the confidence to speak with a whole bunch of people. When I first went to France and started to speak with native speakers, it was very discouraging to be put down by them and looked down upon for trying to speak their language. But I always remembered that they were in the same boat as I was, except instead of them doing what I was doing with French, they were doing the exact same thing with English. The good thing is that there are many kind native speakers that you'll find in France or any French speaking country. So you just have to find the people out there who will support you in your language learning journey and stick with them because those are the people that you can practice with and and just overall get better at French by putting those reps in. And if you can't find any native speakers to speak with, you can find a whole bunch of other different resources to practice with, even in your home country. You know, you can find French clubs, any kind of French related groups where people want to practice and speak together. You can you can even talk with yourself in French if you want to. That would even be better because then you don't have to rely on anybody else. You can just go in the mirror and talk to yourself if you want. I know it sounds crazy, but that is a really good method of practicing a language, especially if you don't have anybody. One of my favorite activities for practicing French speaking on your own is to just come up with a scenario, like a phone conversation scenario. For example, you can pretend that you need to call the doctor's office and schedule an appointment and just write yourself up a little prompt and just give yourself some points that you need to talk about when you're calling the doctor's office to make an appointment. And then when you're ready, go ahead and open up your phone recorder or your computer recorder or whatever and just hit record and pretend that you're calling and talking to the doctor's office in French and try to have a whole conversation with as you would with the doctor and do it as much as you can in French and work through it that way and try to use your vocabulary that way. And then when you're done, you can even listen to the recording and see how well you did and see what you need to improve on, what you did well on, and all of that. Those kinds of test exercises are very good, and I enjoy those more than just taking quizzes or assignments where it's just a pencil and paper. I hope you found this video encouraging for your beginner French learning journey, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more French learning tips and encouragement like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.